It's January 23rd here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with another major cold snap here in South Korea. The nationwide cold snap is reaching its peak today, with morning lows diving to minus 14 degrees Celsius here in Seoul. The country's western coastal areas and Jeju Island are under heavy snow. The U.S. and the U.K. have reportedly staged additional strikes against Houthi targets in Yemen. Monday's attacks are the 8th round of such strikes by the U.S. military against Houthi infrastructure in just over 10 days. The Dow Jones closed Monday above 38,000 for the first time, and the S&P also notched another record close as investors became more hopeful about the course of the economy and looked to coming earnings for signs of an AI and technologies boom. Brutally cold weather is affecting large areas of Korea, along with the blizzard conditions along the west coast and on Jeju. To get the latest, we connect with our Lee Ji-hyun at the Weather Center. Ji-hyun, what do you have for us this morning?
Good morning. Frigid temperatures and biting winds are sweeping most parts of Korea this morning. A cold wave advisory has been upgraded to a warning, and more regions are under cold wave alerts with feels like temperatures below minus 20 degrees Celsius here in the capital. Daegwallyeong in Gangwon province is seeing readings nearing minus 30 degrees Celsius, and we don't expect highs to rise much from our freezing morning figures. Concerns are rising with more snow in the forecast for Chungcheongdo, Jeolla-do provinces, and Jeju with snow alerts in place. Mountainous regions on Jeju could see more than 50 centimeters. Please stay safe. That's all for now, but I will be back with more at the end of the newscast.
Now, over in Gaza, dozens of people have been killed in intense Israeli strikes on Khan Younis. The latest offensive comes as a group of 5 Arab countries are looking to strike a peace deal between Israel and Hamas. Lee Seung-ja has more.
Despite Israel stating that it had shifted to low-intensity offensives in Gaza, its military on Monday conducted intense airstrikes in Khan Younis in southern Gaza, which left dozens dead. There was also fighting on the ground between Israeli soldiers and Hamas fighters, with residents saying that tanks had surrounded a hospital and university where thousands of displaced people were sheltering. Khan Younis has recently been the focus of the Israeli military, an area it says is where Hamas commanders are holed up. On Sunday, Israel also reported that it had found an underground compound in the city where it believed about 20 Israeli hostages had been held. Amid the ongoing conflict, a mediation plan by a group of Arab countries to end the war between Israel and Hamas is taking shape. According to the Wall Street Journal on Monday, 5 Arab nations, including Saudi Arabia, will soon reveal the framework to Israel. An official involved with the mediation process said this latest plan is different from the previous plan, which saw prisoners and hostages exchanged. He added that the final goal is a 2-state solution involving the establishment of a Palestinian state. The White House said Monday that President Joe Biden still believes in the feasibility of a 2-state solution, despite opposition from Israel. According to White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby, Biden believes there is a way to get Israel to agree to the plan and is optimistic about it. However, he stressed that such a plan requires compromise. The European Union's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, on Monday also echoed the need for a 2-state solution, saying Israel's plan to destroy Hamas in Gaza is not working. Ahead of talks with Israeli and Palestinian top diplomats, Borrell said Israel cannot build peace only by military means, echoing Washington's criticism of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's rejection of a 2-state solution. Lee Seung-ja, Arirang News.
The U.S. and the U.K. have conducted a second joint operation to target Houthi military facilities in Yemen in their latest attempt to stop the Houthis' attacks in the Red Sea. According to their joint statement on Monday, the coalition forces carried out attacks on an underground storage site and locations associated with the militant group's missile and air surveillance capabilities. Canada, the Netherlands, Bahrain, and Australia supported the attacks. Meanwhile, the U.S. military on Monday denied the Houthis' claims that they had attacked the American cargo ship Ocean Jazz in the Gulf of Aden. The U.S. began striking the Houthis earlier this month in response to their attacks on commercial vessels in the Red Sea, which the Houthis say are to show their support for Palestine in the Gaza conflict. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has denied that there is any evidence of North Korean weapons being used by Russia and blamed the West for prolonging the war in Ukraine. Lavrov was speaking at a UN Security Council meeting convened at the request of Russia on Monday. Moscow's top diplomat also slammed the West for providing military support to Ukraine, which he said is hindering peace negotiations. Before the meeting, representatives from 46 countries, including South Korea, the U.S., and Japan, and the EU, issued a joint statement accusing Russia of hypocrisy and called the meeting a distraction. Pointing out that Russia's use of North Korean ballistic missiles is a violation of UNSC resolutions, the diplomats also raised the possibility of Russia helping to develop North Korea's weapons technology. Israel, well, at least its Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu seems to have no interest whatsoever in ending the Gaza war through Hamas's proposal. Then when will a breakthrough come? For more, we're joined by Professor Austin Newbay this morning. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Thanks for joining us. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected Hamas's proposal to end the war in exchange for freeing the remaining hostages. Does Netanyahu want to see the end of Hamas? Is that what Israel really wants?
Well, the interests of the Netanyahu coalition and that of the Israeli people, I think, are quite divergent. Netanyahu is beginning to understand that the two goals of IDF operations in Gaza, eliminating and degrading Hamas and freeing the hostages, are mutually exclusive. The Israeli approach to defeating Hamas is not going to lead to the release of the hostages, and Netanyahu is incapable of waging the war in such a manner that will also release the hostages. And so he's in a no-win situation, both politically within his coalition and also among the Israeli people.
Definitely calls for a deal are growing within Israel, like you mentioned, especially from families of those hostages vowing to continue their protest. Some say Netanyahu will have to give in eventually. Professor, what's your take on this?
So Netanyahu, in the last week especially, has faced increased domestic opposition to the coalition war plan in Gaza. We've seen public protests in the Knesset and out on the streets. That the Israeli people are increasingly growing war-weary and upset that the remaining 130 hostages have not been released. At the same time, Netanyahu is keeping an eye on the American election, understanding that his viability as prime minister and his ability to maintain a coalition is also dependent on who wins the White House in November 2024. And so it's a delicate balancing game of managing politics within his own coalition within Tel Aviv and also watching and monitoring the U.S. election this autumn.
Right. The Israeli PM is surely under huge pressure within his country, but the U.S. is also pushing Israel and Hamas to really accept a comprehensive plan that would end the war, release those hostages, and form a Palestinian state, which Netanyahu has strongly rejected. Do you think there needs to be more pressure from Washington? What do you think?
It's certainly. The recent negotiations to introduce a ceasefire by the 5 Arab states are notable and honorable. The problem is you need the Americans on board for that negotiation, that the Biden administration needs to exercise leverage and conditionality with security assistance and support to Netanyahu and to the Israeli Defense Force. The only way this will be resolved, particularly on the end of protecting Palestinian civilians and releasing the hostages, is for the Biden administration to offer conditional assistance based on the resumption of a two-state solution peace plan. There needs to be a political settlement. There's no military solution to what's going on in Gaza. There's a political negotiation alongside the military campaign.
Right. Professor Newbay, then if the conflict over in Gaza does last as Netanyahu insists and wishes, how long do you think it'll actually last? I mean, how well will Israel and Hamas be able to actually hold up?
The answer to that depends not only on battlefield conditions within South Gaza, it's also what happens on the Israeli street. If the domestic public within Israel are growing increasingly frustrated with the lack of progress, particularly the lack of hostage release, you'll see mounting domestic pressure that will affect Netanyahu's domestic political calculus and also the way they wage the campaign in Gaza. Right now, we've seen attacks just in the last 48 hours, killing 65, increasing humanitarian pressure on the residents of Khan Younis in South Gaza. And as the humanitarian situation gets more dire, international pressure, particularly from the Europeans and the Americans, is only bound to increase. And so Netanyahu is facing domestic pressure at home from the Israeli electorate alongside pressure from international partners.
Definitely. Netanyahu's ultimate goal is to destroy Hamas. And how realizable is that goal to actually see the end of Hamas?
Well, I think we've seen the answer to that since 2005, that the ability of the Israeli military to grade and destroy Hamas as a militant organization is extraordinarily difficult. Even if you're able to eliminate the current political and military leadership of the organization, the ideology is still going to exist. And the problem is the way the IDF has waged the war in Gaza has increased Palestinian support for Hamas since the war began. We've seen through waves of surveying that prior to the war, 1 in 4 residents of Gaza supported Hamas, and now it's up to 1 in 3, or perhaps as high as 40% of Palestinians see Hamas as the only viable resistance force to force the Israeli government to the negotiating table.
Definitely, it's a lot more complicated than it looks based on the past experience that the Israel and Hamas saw. All right, Professor Nupe, thank you so much for your time this morning. We appreciate it, as always.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
Over in the U.S., the Dow Jones Industrial Average closed at above 38,000 for the first time in history. And the S&P 500 index also clinching another all-time high. Our Choi Soo-hyung has the details.
U.S. stocks climbed on Monday local time to set new records. The Dow Jones Industrial Average advanced above 138 points to finish at 38,001.81, closing above the 38,000 level for the first time. The S&P 500 reached an all-time high, closing at above 4,850. The Nasdaq Composite climbed 49.32 points to above 15,360. Last Friday, the S&P 500 index broke its previous record set 2 years ago. Technology stocks are rising despite the adjustment in expectations regarding possible interest rate cuts by the Federal Reserve. In the S&P 500, stocks in industries such as real estate, finance, and healthcare were all up. However, stock market experts have expressed concerns that stock valuations are too high and that companies' actual performances may not support these levels. According to data from the Conference Board global think tank, the U.S. leading economic index in December showed a decline for the 21st consecutive month, indicating economic recession in the U.S. IBM, Netflix and Tesla are about to release their business result this week, while earnings are expected to decrease along with the slowdown in growth. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
And moving on to the Youth Winter Olympics being held over in Gangwon-do Province, South Korea. The Olympic cauldron, often seen as a symbol of the Games, takes on an even more special significance in Gangwon 2024. Correspondent Song Yu-jin tells us why.
These red and orange flames may look real, but they're anything but. What you're seeing is the first digital cauldron in Olympic history. Shortly after the final torchbearer lit the actual cauldron during Friday's opening ceremony of the 2024 Gangwon Winter Youth Olympic Games, the digital cauldron also burst into flames.
The flames look so authentic. I can't tell if it's the heat from the flames or just the overall excitement for the Games, but I can definitely feel the warmth here.
This is part of Gangwon 2024's aim to host a green and sustainable Olympics.
If we were to use the traditional cauldron, we would need to use gas. As we've become more conscious and aware about the environment, we wanted to try something new.
The secret behind the digital cauldron? Anamorphic technology.
Anamorphic technology is a specialized video technique that gives a three-dimensional appearance to a flat surface. So while the digital cauldron is essentially a cube-shaped electronic display board, it creates the illusion that the flames are burning inside when you look at it.
The cauldron mirrors the actual weather conditions based on data from the Korea Meteorological Administration, like this if it rains. But rest assured, the flames won't be extinguished. All of this is controlled by cloud servers. A remote data center operating through cloud computing determines what's displayed on the screen. Gangwon 2024 has set up 5 servers, 3 in Korea and 2 in Japan, in case of emergencies. As for the actual cauldron, its embers are housed inside a lantern at the athletes' village, blending tradition with innovation. So the digital cauldron will burn in front of the Gangneung Hockey Center until the closing ceremony on February 1st. 송유진, Arirang News, Gangneung.
Good morning, I'm Kim Seong, and now we turn off to stories from around the world. We begin today in China, where a 7.1 magnitude earthquake shook China's Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region in the early hours of Tuesday. No casualties have been reported so far. According to the China Earthquake Network Center, the strong quake above 7 magnitude hit Wuxi County in Aksu Prefecture at 2:09 a.m. on Tuesday. A succession of aftershocks topping a 5.3 magnitude followed the main earthquake. The epicenter, with a depth of 22 kilometers, was situated in the mountainous border area between China and Kyrgyzstan. In temperatures of around -10 degrees Celsius, local residents of the Aksu area rushed to open space for safety, while firefighters were dispatched immediately. In Cameroon, the world's first routine vaccine program against malaria began on Monday. Around 40 years in the making, the new malaria vaccine approved by the World Health Organization will be offered free of charge to all infants of up to 6 months old in Cameroon. The symbolic first malaria jab was given to a baby girl named Daniela on Monday at a health clinic in the country's capital, Yaoundé. After decades of research, GlaxoSmithKline developed the RTS vaccine, which, according to US research, is expected to be effective in over 36% of the cases. While Cameroon is the first country to run wide-scale malaria vaccinations, 19 other countries aim to begin jabs this year, according to Gavi, a global vaccine alliance. In Africa, malaria kills around 600,000 people every year, with children under 5 accounting for at least 80% of the deaths. In Ecuador, a military operation seized a record 22 metric tons of cocaine on Sunday against a backdrop of chaotic internal armed conflict against organized crime. Officials confirmed on Monday that the seizure was one of the country's biggest narcotics busts, which followed 6 months of preparation and surveillance. Ecuador's military on Sunday publicized videos on social media site X showing warehouses of plastic-wrapped and boxed packages. The armed forces stated that the drugs were distributed in 733 individual parcels to be transported to Asia, Europe, and the Americas. Ecuador is still under a 60-day state of emergency as it battles to control organized crime cartels in the wake of an outbreak of violence across the country. Lastly, in the US, fierce winter storms across the country have left at least 92 dead over the past week. According to CBS News, there were 25 weather-related fatalities in Tennessee and 16 in Oregon, with both states under a state of emergency following the deadly ice storms. Deaths have also been reported in Mississippi, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Washington, Kentucky, Wisconsin, New York, and New Jersey. Tens of thousands of people across the US were also left without power and access to water due to the weather. Icy conditions are expected to ease off in the coming days.
Good morning. Korea is in the grip of an intense cold snap. Make sure to dress in double layers and cover up from head to toe. It's going to be one freezing day all day with sharp winds. Making matters worse for those in Jeolla-do provinces and Jeju, there is more snow. Wet clouds are dropping heavy snow on those areas this morning. If you're traveling to Jeolla-do and Jeju, check your travel schedules in advance for any changes there could be. West of Jeolla-do could see more than 20 centimeters of snowfall today. Meanwhile, athletes in Gangwon-do will need to brace for extreme cold weather. Especially those in Pyeongchang will notice an even colder afternoon than yesterday, with an expected high of minus 14 degrees Celsius. Seoul gets up to -7, even Busan only tops out at 1 degree this afternoon. And it will feel like being in a freezer through Thursday, so please stay safe till then. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions. We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Wednesday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 웰컴. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, who's lying? Make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
We're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's January 23rd here in Seoul. I'm Shin-Yoon, and you're watching News Generation. Joining me in the studio is Cheska Dainong.
Happy Tuesday, everyone.
Happy Tuesday. And Chin Ji-hee.
Good morning.
Good morning. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. Starting with news in the United States, the week-long Arctic cold wave that has hit much of the nation has taken more than 50 lives. Freeze alerts were issued over the weekend to even some of the warmest areas, including Texas and Florida. States that usually see snow this time of the year saw record amounts. New York saw snow pile up, ending its nearly 2-year snow drought. Over the weekend, Japan made a major space feat. It became the 5th country in the world to achieve a soft lunar landing thanks to its vessel dubbed Moon Sniper. However, just hours after the probe made the touchdown, Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency could not confirm whether the craft's solar batteries were generating power. It later found out that if sunlight hits the moon from the west, there was a possibility of power being generated again. The agency on Monday said it's currently preparing for restoration. Now, here in the greater capital region, it costs at least $7 to have a proper lunch. That's according to KB Card, which surveyed how much male office workers in the capital region spent during lunchtime. The Korea Consumer Agency found that the average price of commonly sought food dishes in Seoul back in December rose by 6% compared to a year ago. And the average amount that Seoul's male workers spent on lunch is almost double what their Japanese counterparts spend. A local bank in Japan found that men on average would spend around $4 for lunch. Women would spend around $5. Even though the average lunch price in neighboring Japan is much lower compared to that of Korea, many there have also complained over surging inflation. Back in 2023, Japan saw its inflation rate surpass 2%, which was the first time in 41 years. And this also shows just how severe the food price surge has been here in Korea as well. Now, here in the studio, as a working female worker yourself, I think you can empathize with the fact that it costs so much to have lunch here in the greater capital region. So what were your thoughts on this story?
Well, we've talked about how go-to lunch menus such as kimbap, jjajangmyeon, like naengmyeon have all increased in terms of their prices. So I guess the best way to save your money for lunch would be to really pack your own lunch. I mean, it's not easy, but pack your own lunch, plan your menus ahead, make sure that it doesn't require that much effort, and perhaps share it with your colleagues.
Oh, you're so caring.
You know, I mean, like together. They should bring their own lunch too. Share it.
Okay, she's not packing lunch for the whole team. That's not what she wants to do.
Yeah, I was really odd for a second because I was going to ask, what can I have from your lunch bag?
It's an exchange.
So it's like a potluck. You bring your own lunch and then share it with your colleagues.
It's BYOL, bring your own lunch.
Bring your own lunch. But I agree. I think that's the best way to go. But it's so difficult because after a hard days of work, you just want to sleep. You don't want to get up early in the morning and pack your lunch. But nowadays, it seems like it's inevitable given that food prices have been soaring, right?
Yeah. And I unfortunately don't have a colleague like Ji who would be willing to pack her lunch and share it with me. So I'm kind of on my own here. But I think one of the first things that we should consider is when inflations like these happen, I do believe that the government should make sure that the minimum wage also goes up so that the general income of people also goes up so they can actually sustain their basic necessities. On the other hand, though, I mean, I agree with Ji. What we could do is probably pack our lunches and maybe lessen the times that we go out to eat. However, like we said, this is a greater capital area, and everybody is pretty much, running to the next place, trying to finish the job and get home. So I honestly think it's more up to the government to make sure that they have their basic necessities fulfilled. Yeah.
And hopefully we'll see food prices come down in a very near future, or we'll have that culture of bringing our own lunch and sharing it like a potluck, as Ji mentioned. Now, switching gears into our main discussion topic of the day, following the death of actor Lee Sun-gyun, known for his role in the Oscar-winning film Parasite, controversy has brewed over whether the Korean police and media excessively investigate and disclose information of celebrities or public figures when they're caught up in allegations of illicit behavior. My AI voice secretary will tell you more.
Just days before the new year, actor Lee Sun-gyun was found dead in an apparent suicide case. His death came as a shock to many as he was still in the process of police questioning amid suspicions of illegal drug use. The public's reaction quickly flipped overnight. Heavy criticism against the actor was soon directed at the police and media. The public began accusing the police and media outlets of having disclosed information about Lee's illegal drug allegations at the initial stage of investigation, which they claimed caused irreversible damage to the actor's reputation.
It's not just Lee Sun-gyun who had his personal life revealed to the public. Recently, South Korean actor Kang Kyung-jun was caught up in an infidelity scandal, and previous chat records of him allegedly cheating on his wife went viral on the internet. So it's no longer surprising how we're easily accessing public figures' personal lives and even their deepest chat records online, which has spurred immense controversy. So Cheska, why don't we start here, starting with Lee Sun-gyun. What types of controversies have spurred from his death?
Sure. The incident that sparked the controversy happened just less than a month ago. Actor Lee Sun-gyun was charged with use of illicit drugs, and in the process of interrogation through private phone calls and text messages, it was also revealed that he was allegedly involved with sex workers as well. Now, he ultimately committed suicide thereafter, and now during the investigation process, several media outlets did leak this very private information to the public, such as the actual recording of the phone conversation. And some believe that this went too far beyond the, quote, public's right to know.
You mentioned a good point there, the public's right to know, and because of that, I am aware that a lot of prominent cultural figures actually had a press briefing on this, right, Ji? Would you like to elaborate?
So recently, like you said, a group of public figures, artists, South Korean artists, led by Parasite filmmaker Bong Joon-ho, they opened up a press conference asking for the public officials to really deep dive into the investigation of Lee Sun-gyun. They demanded answers regarding the police's handling of the case. And in fact, Lee's drug use case was dealt by the media outlets in a very provocative way. And it was said that for his second summon, he didn't want to be publicly revealed, but then his appearance at the police station was revealed, and the truth behind this was also demanded. And even YouTubers, they released quite provocative videos of the personal life of Lee as well. So Bong Joon-ho and others were questioning whether this level of investigation and coverage of the case was necessary and if it was really appropriate, in fact. And Bong Joon-ho also said it clearly should be explained whether or not it's lawful, that no measures were taken to really protect this figure, and the group of artists, and Bong Joon-ho holding this press conference and standing up for the case is the only way to really prevent any further tragedies happening again among the artists in Korea.
I see. And Cheska, do you have anything to add more to this story?
And while for the Lee Sung-gyun's case, it was concrete evidence showing that he was involved in the sad matter. However, there absolutely could be unforeseen consequences when it comes to the extent of information that is revealed. And this isn't the first time that the entertainment media got away with either spreading wildfire or revealing too much personal information of an entertainer. Now, for instance, as the aforementioned case of the alleged infidelity, the family photo with the son was also revealed. And there are some very unforeseen consequences that can spread to the people around them who are not necessarily involved in the case.
I see. Then where do you guys stand on this issue? I think as long as we're living in a democratic society, the question always stands. Do you think the public has a right to know what's going on to the extent of delving through personal chats and messages of public figures as long as they're being investigated for illegal conduct? Or do you think this is just way too excessive?
Well, the question of whether an exposure of a public figure's private life is excessive or not really depends on the case. I think with Lee's case, it was too much and thorough investigation needs to be done. But then with Kang Kyung-jun, I think the story is a little bit different because Kang Kyung-jun, he's appeared on a family-centered variety program before. He was depicting himself, portraying himself as a very loving and responsible father. And he, in fact, leveraged that character that he built by gaining the public's trust to really run advertisements, shoot advertisements, and also run his own business. So I think the public must have felt deeply betrayed and very shocked at this revelation of the infidelity. And as a public figure, whether you be a politician or a celebrity, I think it's important to realize that you still do have that power to influence others' emotions and others' lives as well.
Exactly. I'd like to use the quote, with great power comes great responsibility. And I think especially here in Korea, the Korean public has high expectations for its public figures, whether it not just be politicians, but celebrities itself, because we think that they garner a lot of attention, fame, and even wealth, so they need to match par with the level of responsibility that we're looking forward to seeing from them. But Cheska, where do you stand personally on this issue?
I'm a little bit careful to draw the line between what actually did happen and what happened thereafter. So I do believe that media may have crossed some lines in terms of revealing the information to the public. But let's not forget that actor Lee did get himself involved in the messy business in the first place. Now, having said that, as for the infidelity case of the male celebrity, as a public, I would rather know more about the politicians who are running our country, who are making laws that directly affect the livelihood of my choices to vote for them, rather than someone's dirty laundry or personal business, because I think those are two separate matters. And yes, as a public figure, whether that be an entertainer and especially politicians, the position does come with certain responsibilities. And I do hope that people who are in those positions do truly understand this, and so do the media, because in this particular case, I do believe that journalists practice the quote right to know in the not so right places.
That is so true, and I think it's really up to media and journalists to give a neutral perspective rather than really bring up that herd collective mindset and bring on people to have a certain mindset or like a perspective on an issue even when investigations weren't over. So we'll have to see how media plays out from this point on forward. But in the meantime, we asked our viewers where they stand on this issue, whether information on a public figure's latest scandal or alleged misconduct should be revealed to the public or not, and if so, to which extent it should be revealed. Take a look at the screen to find out what 3 of them had to share with us. Let's start with Cha. Cha said public figures are human too, so I think they have the right to keep some of their privacy. I think if they're not doing something that harms people, it's better to not reveal their privacy too much. You Can Change Elias said, my opinion is that a person has the same right to his personal life outside of the job that highlights him, whether he's a politician or artist, etc., as common people. What has to do with work is one thing, the rest of personal life is personal life. Agamon said, if you choose to be in that position that you have to accept, you'll be scrutinized. Nobody wants to be told what to do by someone who can't handle their own issues. So this is definitely a contentious issue that has a lot of surrounding arguments. But to find out how other countries deal with disclosing public figures' information and what it's like here in Korea, we're going to include a legal expert who can give a very thorough comparison. Stay tuned for our live interview. We're now going to talk to a professor of law at Hongik University here in Korea. It's Professor Cho. Welcome, Professor Cho.
Hello, good morning.
All right, Professor Cho, the reason why we have you here in the studio is to have a better comparison on how the public takes in information, whether it's the right to know versus a public figure's personal life. In other parts of the world, particularly like the United States, to which extent can a public figure's information be disclosed, especially when they're caught up in a potential criminal case?
Well, generally speaking, in the pre-indictment process, so during the investigation process, most criminal investigation authorities tend to not to disclose information too much. Obviously, it's going to depend on the jurisdiction, the nature of the case, what type of matters are involved, as well as legal and ethical considerations.
Professor Cho, due to the audio right now, we do have to connect to you one more time, but in the meantime, why don't we continue our discussion first and talk more about this case?
Sure.
The reason why I want to compare the cases of how we view public information and public figures' personal life here in Korea to other parts of the world is I believe that South Korean public has a very unique trait. What do you think that is?
You know, I'm so glad that you brought that up because we were just discussing this off-air right before we started. But I think there's a different sort of reception when it comes to, just to give you an example, the United States versus South Korea. As you know, there are blasts and blasts of some unbelievable cases that are revealed to the public in America. However, a lot of celebrities go either through rehab or, take a pause on their career to, take care of their lives and then come back to the scene.
Right.
And they're not as heavily or harshly criticized for their moral conduct, as I suppose, as it is in South Korea. But I wonder if it has to do with the fact that because we're such a homogenous society, the very tiny differences or the very, very minute differences loom a lot larger in a country such as ours. As for the moral standard that we uphold in our country, I personally believe it is right for me. But again, I think that is up to the people to discuss.
You mentioned a really good point. I do think comparing it with the United States, and the reason why we're doing so is there's so many scandals. There are a lot of
unbelievable
on different public figures, but I think the public's reaction sort of is different because here in Korea, if a public figure, whether that be a celebrity or politician, makes a mistake, I think the public is very quick to react. They make a very firm stance and it's quite rigid, so it doesn't really change easily, whereas in the States, there's a lot of marketing tactics. But now, we're going to talk to the same legal expert. I think the audio is ready now. Let's connect back to Professor Cho, who would provide an expert analysis. So Professor Cho, let me ask you the first question again. To what extent can information on a public figure be disclosed in places like the United States that seemingly uses this sometimes as marketing scheme?
So, as I was saying, it depends. But generally speaking, the broad principle is not to disclose, especially during the pre-indictment process, including investigation of the matter itself and interrogation of witnesses, including the suspect. So in Lee Seung-gun's case, there was actually no indictment. This was just an investigation that was conducted by the police, and they were looking at certain evidences and questioning the potential suspect. And during that process, all sorts of private and personal information about the actor was, it seems, intentionally and deliberately leaked to the media because the actor himself is not going to disclose that kind of information. So where could that information have come from?
Very true.
Only from the police. And even under Korean law, there is actually a principle of non-disclosure before indictment. And this is so often breached that people actually forget that this is the law. But in Lee Seung-gun's case, there was really a travesty of justice because this compromises the principle of presumption of innocence. If you have this kind of information leaked to the media, people jump to the conclusion and suspect that, oh, there can't be any smoke unless there is fire, and everyone thinks that he's guilty without any kind of concrete evidence or even having gone through a trial process. And so this was a really terrible miscarriage of justice.
It was a miscarriage of justice. And before we go on to the second question, very briefly, how is it handled in the States then? If a similar case were to have happened there, how would the States be revealing information on a potential criminal case?
Right.
So in the States, the system is slightly different, and they actually use a grand jury to decide whether to prosecute a person in a serious criminal case, such as this sort of case. And there is a very strong and strict principle of non-disclosure in the pre-indictment stage and to protect grand jury secrecy. Just a case in point, in the last few days, we heard the news that actor Alec Baldwin is now being charged by the New Mexico police, prosecution for involuntary manslaughter. Right. Now, nothing of that news was actually released or leaked to the media before the prosecution came out with the announcement that the actor was going to be indicted. And if you compare that to Lee Seung-gun's case, you can really see a clear difference.
I see. And Chi, would you like to ask the last question?
Sure. So what would you say is the appropriate amount of information being disclosed to ensure the public's right to know?
You have to consider whether the information being disclosed is really in the public interest to disclose it. Yes. There's a clear difference between what the public is interested in. A lot of public is interested in salacious gossip, that kind of thing. But what good does it do to the public or for the public to know that this actor, this particular person, is simply being suspected of having committed these acts without there being real proof? At that point in time, the investigation should have been conducted in secrecy, and nothing should have been disclosed to the media.
I see. Thank you so much, Professor Joy. It was a pleasure talking to you today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and ending off, how would you guys like to see this issue, the right to privacy versus a public figure's personal life, and to which extent it should be disclosed, develop from now on?
Well, this is going to be an ongoing issue, balancing the importance between the public's right to know as well as protecting the personal lives of public figures. But I feel like as for individuals, like Professor Cho said, no jumping to conclusions and no denouncing the individual based on assumptions unless there's been an absolute truth that's been revealed. And I think in this sense, we should also have a law in place, just like the U.S., where we can protect the potential criminals before indictment.
Exactly.
Just in case they end up being innocent.
Exactly. I do think stronger regulations are needed for cases like this. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, as a political science major, I still do believe that I, as a public and a voter, has the right to know about the public figure, because as one of our commentators said, nobody wants to be told what to do by someone who can't handle their business. That's just the truth. However, when it comes to entertainers and very sensitive business, I think Professor said it very clearly. There's a difference between what public is interested in and what is good for the public interest.
Right.
And I hope the media and the public practice their best judgment to differentiate the two.
I think we need a better definition on what is our right to know. We need to really clarify which type of information is really rightfully known to the public. And hopefully discussions will be facilitated from now on. But in the meantime, we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Cheska Dainha.
Pleasure's always mine. Thank you.
And Chiji.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are News Generation.
Welcome. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? Welcome.